as we take a moment to allow everyone to come back after the tea break. We're extremely delighted and thrilled to have the Honorable Union Minister for Commerce and Industry, Shri Piyush Goyal ji, with us. It is fitting in the scheme of things and also with the topic of this year's Raisina Dialogue, Lighthouse in the Tempest, as you guys have put it. So in all the changes that are going on geopolitically, first we had COVID, which is a once in a lifetime event. 2 years got disrupted because of that. And then we have now the Russia-Ukraine war. Amidst all of these global uncertainties, I think the India story seems to be one of the positives, one of the green shoots, something that is standing out in a way that everybody around the world is taking note of. We've had an incredible last financial year, record exports for the first time. Exports of goods alone has crossed $400 billion. But this year, there are the headwinds that people are talking about, whether it's in the developed economies, in the United States, in Europe. How much of those headwinds will affect India, or will India manage to be, as the theme for this year's session is, the lighthouse amidst the tempest? So who better to talk to us about this topic, and particularly on the issue of the disruptions that have been caused because of the pandemic first, and then subsequently because of the Russia-Ukraine war. We have with us the Honorable Union Minister for Commerce and Industry, Shri Piyush Goyal. So let me start, Minister, with, we've had an incredible last year, despite all the headwinds that I just outlined, whether it was the pandemic, whether it was the Russia-Ukraine war. In your assessment, what resulted in this? How were we able to transcend, or at least take on some of these headwinds and end up with, like I said, $400 billion of merchandise exports?
Thank you very much, and my compliments to Raisina Dialogue for creating quite an institution in terms of the high quality of participation, deliberation, discussion, and truly very encouraging to see the response from across the world to this very important engagement. I think India was blessed over the last 3 years for having initiated about a decade ago a series of transformational measures which should have been done in many cases, I think maybe 50, 70 years ago, but which ultimately held us in very good stead when we faced the pandemic. I'll give you a couple of examples. We had initiated the Swachh Bharat Mission, the Clean India campaign in 2014. Imagine trying to struggle with COVID, with all the uncertainties around COVID, with the kind of muck and dirt we used to see around the country once upon a time. We initiated the electrification of first the villages and then took it down to every household. Nearly 35 million households who didn't have electricity connections until 2014, which is a hell of a lot of kids, at least 70 million kids or 80 million kids or 150 million people without a basic amenity like electricity. Also, we initiated expansion of our entire transmission grid, our generating capacity, got a lot of renewables, and created the entire nation as one grid. So power could be transmitted anywhere, anytime, to ensure 24 hours electricity. Now this was initiated in 14. And by 19 we had every willing consumer in the country having electricity in the remotest parts of India. And available 24/7 should he need it, or should he pay his bills and the state be able to manage their distribution. Now imagine the COVID without electricity in every home. No television, education would have gone for a toss, no online education, nothing to keep you busy. You would have had a whole country of people who would have lost their mind tackling this very tough situation. Electricity is kind of empowerment of the individual. We initiated giving good proper housing to people across the country. Now almost 32 to 35 million homes have been provided to those who didn't have a proper home. Now, that many families would have probably just not had any ability to withstand COVID. But for the fact that they had a proper home, and with that came electricity also and the other basic amenities. And the list goes on and on. 500 million people getting free health care. Now, there was a time a family would be busy all their life, or a person, working person was busy all his or her life, making small savings so that someday they can own their own house.
Yeah.
And if somebody fell sick in the process, forget the savings, you'll ended up with huge debt on your head.
Correct.
And remained labor all your life. 500 million people assured of free health care, 2.2 billion doses of free vaccine. Now, this entire effort through the COVID period, coupled with the initiatives over the last 8 years, 7 years before that, collectively helped the nation in meeting this big challenge. Of course, we had the decisive leadership of Prime Minister Modi, who led from the front, and we were all part of the entire exercise under his leadership. And I can tell you, he was relentlessly pursuing new and better ideas and ways not only to tackle COVID, but to convert this crisis into an opportunity. So I think it's been an entire period where the country has created a foundation on which such black swan events can be managed better, handled better. Similarly, on the conflict currently underway, I think he has displayed exemplary leadership. And I have no doubt in my mind that at some point of time, history will recognize not only Prime Minister Modi's role in handling this entire situation, bringing the country together to overcome this the crisis that the world is facing, but also his own role in finally resolving the crisis.
Okay, I'll come to the war in a second, but I want to talk a little bit about COVID and when the lockdown happened. You know, global trade had pretty much shut down. Supply chains were very, very deeply disrupted. Did you imagine that coming off that 2 years of disruption through COVID, we had multiple lockdowns and so on, India would end up as being one of the largest exporters in the world? In fact, our highest record exports were for the year that just passed.
Well, I think it was an effort that was to a plan. It was not that it happened on its own. Again, very deep dive analysis was done of our strength areas, the markets where we could look at expanding our exports, the products, the huge effort to involve the states and people and business at the district levels. You'll be amazed, there were more than half the districts of the country who had negligible or almost no exports. The contribution to our export effort comes from a handful of districts, 10-15% of our districts. There's no serious understanding the huge benefits exports or international trade can bring to the common man in remote areas. This whole exercise started under Prime Minister's guidance about 3 years ago, and a lot of painstaking work went behind setting targets, getting all our 180 odd missions on board. So today a mission, and I see a lot of foreign service officers here and diplomats. Today, finally, after years and years of the demand by Indian industry, our missions have got engaged with trade, with technology, and with tourism. And I remember there was a time when I was in the private sector, we used to be so jealous of the other foreign business persons whose ambassadors and mission heads were merrily and happily supporting their industry through their trials and tribulations or problems. Whereas Indian missions thought it was not their job or were scared to even hold the hand or help anybody.
Engage.
We've changed that. We've now got the missions involved in this entire exercise. And I must compliment Prime Minister for his vision on this respect and Dr. Jaishankar for his leadership of the missions and the way he has encouraged all the foreign service officers to really be a part of this journey. Last year was, of course, a record. We crossed $650 billion of goods and services. This year is in for an even bigger record. So
it's interesting you say that this year we are in for an even bigger record because, if you look at, what's happening in the Western world, in the US, in Europe, not just because of the war, but, the inflation story has still not been tamed, as it were. What gives you the confidence that you can top that 600 billion figure that you just mentioned?
Well, first of all, it's the figures available up to 28th of February which give me that confidence.
Okay.
So we've of course crossed last year's figure already. And we are well on track to give you, in the 75th year of independence, a number which will make 140 crore Indians very, very proud.
Give us a ballpark.
Well, I thought I gave a hint when I said 75th year of independence.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. So we're looking at the 750 range. He's not saying it, but I'm inferring from what he said. But tell me, Minister.
We'll be hopefully crossing $750 billion.
Wow. Can we have a round of applause? $750 billion of goods and services exported from India. I want to talk a little bit about the war. You mentioned this a moment ago about some of the headwinds from the war in terms of fuel prices, fertilizer prices. What is your assessment of how much that has impacted India, and how has India been able to cushion itself? Because we have, as ministers keep pointing out, we have the largest sort of consumer base of oil. We have to find oil wherever we get it the cheapest.
Well, it's been tough times, trying times undoubtedly, but again an opportunity for India to show its resilience. For example, food security was clearly going to be a serious challenge before the world. One could see it, and fertilizers is the beginning of that story. While most of the world focused its attention on their immediate needs of food and food grain and other items, Prime Minister Modi foresaw that it will be important to have adequate fertilizer for our needs for the year ahead and possibly more than a year ahead. So he immediately focused on getting adequate supplies of fertilizer tied in, not only for last year but for the current year and beyond. So today we are in a situation where India, and we've traditionally been dependent on a few items for imports like lentils or edible oils. Other than that, on almost every other item that we produce in India for our people in terms of food security, we are self-sufficient, and we will continue to produce at greater levels than last year, so that we can also support some of our neighbors and some of our other friendly countries, particularly the small nations, the Pacific Island nations, the Caribbean nations, our friends in the Gulf, our neighbors, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So India doesn't think about itself alone. As we have seen Prime Minister Modi on more occasions than one, and including at the G20, talk about one earth, one family, one future. Similarly, I think this is one area of food security where we not only care for every Indian, but we are also able to care for many people across the world. But when fertilizer prices hit the roof, smartly, Prime Minister Modi ensured that the farmer doesn't have to take that pain. He would probably have been uncertain or unable to be able to handle the kind of 8x increase in fertilizer prices that we saw, 8 times.
Yeah.
Right? Now that 800% increase could have collapsed Indian agriculture, particularly when we have small farmers. Our small and marginal farmers with less than 2 hectares of land are almost 85-90%, maybe more than 90% of our farming base. So he took the entire burden on himself, on the central government, and we ensured that fertilizer and basic needs of the farmers were met at original earlier prices. We also gave them the additional support through the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Yojana, a small amount we give as a recognition of his contribution to our food security, to help him in his small needs. We also ensured that the production of the farmers gets a fair price in the marketplace, and any support that was required towards that end was guaranteed for the farmers. So it's been a partnership with the farming community, with the agricultural world, that truly was very forward-looking and very sensitive in its approach, but also something which will ensure that India doesn't have any food grain crisis.
I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that the pandemic did was disrupt supply chains, of course, And I guess that event sort of made companies sit up and realize that you can't be so dependent on just China for all your manufacturing needs. So companies started talking about the China plus one strategy. And I know the government has been pushing really hard for electronics manufacturers, smartphone manufacturers. I think you've allocated about 75,000 crores on that. How confident are you that India can be that China plus one, that plus one in that?
Well, that's for the investors to take a final call. We are creating an enabling environment to attract investment into India. Now, it could be investment which on its own is smart enough to understand that here is a country of 1.4 billion people and 1.4 billion aspirational young people with great managerial talent, with great skill sets, and a set of people who, unlike 10 years ago, when food and clothing and shelter, health, education, the basic needs of life were their biggest priority and problem, are today well taken care of. They've been empowered through a series of steps, ensuring that their food grains are taken care of. You know, we spend nearly 4 lakh crores.
Yeah.
It's about $50 billion during the COVID, 2 years of COVID, giving double the amount of food grain that used to be given under the food security program.
Correct.
Free of charge, to ensure that not one household has to sleep hungry through COVID. I mean, the Spanish flu, more people died of hunger than of the Spanish flu itself.
Yeah.
Here we ensured not one person had to sleep hungry at night. So through the last 8 years, 9 years, we've ensured that all the basic needs of everybody are taken care of. And that is empowerment. By empowering the individual who's today connected through his smartphone or through the television to the whole world, sees the good things in the world, he wants those things. He wants to be a part of this growth story of the world. He wants maybe a dishwasher at home with more and more women in India coming into the workplace.
Yeah.
He wants a washing machine. Our young boys and girls are working hard so that they can upgrade their telephone, so that they can upgrade their refrigerator, their television set, they can upgrade their computer. Now, all of this is a huge market opportunity. So India not only provides a huge domestic market, which will help them get scale in manufacturing or provision of goods and services, but help us become more competitive in the world market. Now, with all these imperatives coupled with the government's focus on ease of doing business, decriminalizing various laws, reducing compliance burden, providing production-linked incentives in those critical sectors where we have less amount of manufacturing in India currently, or where we are overtly short in terms of meeting the future needs of the country, or areas of critical need like semiconductors. We brought in government support programs. We are digitizing the entire economy in almost every respect, promoting startups in a big way, and the list goes on and on. And therefore, with all these imperatives, the foundational blocks that have been built, I think the world will not get a better friend, a trusted partner, better than India anywhere else in the world.
You talked about semiconductors, and we had a session earlier today about Taiwan and this possibility of a war over Taiwan. As you know, I think one company, TSMC alone, manufactures almost 90% of the foundational needs for the semiconductor industry, as it were. Explain to us, what is it that the Indian government is doing to push indigenous semiconductor manufacturing and also attracting global investors and global companies to come and manufacture semiconductors in India?
Well, the technology of semiconductors is in the hands of a few companies. It's not something which is available across the continent, across the world easily. We have been very focused in our efforts to attract that investment into India. One announcement has already been made in Gujarat, where there will be an investment of over $14 or $15 billion in a semiconductor complex. Many other semiconductor companies around the world are in dialogue with the Ministry of IT, Electronics and IT, METI. And I think more and more countries and companies recognize that when we talk of friendshoring or when we talk of resilient supply chains, that India, with its rule of law, transparent economy, where we have a vibrant democracy, is a good place to set up critical elements of their supply chain. Many companies are in dialogue for investing in India in the semiconductor chain. I've had engagement with many companies in the US and other parts of the world, including Taiwan. They are looking at the steps that will be required, the ecosystem that they will need. Many have already started design and packaging in India in a big way. Many are planning to expand their operations in India. And I think it'll be it's a process-driven industry. It's not something that will happen overnight. But the process has begun swiftly and is growing very, very fast.
Last couple of questions before we open this up to our audience for a couple of questions. I do want to ask you about, this has been a running theme. It's been there for a number of years now, about the trade with China. Despite the, political tensions and so on, we've had, I think, record trade with China last year. The trade deficit is also pretty substantial. It's about 70 billion or so. How do you plan to, bring that down?
Well, first of all, one must look at the context in which this trade deficit came in, or the increased imports from China. If you look back until 2000, 2001, our total trade with China was about $1 billion. Even until 2004, trade was probably in the region of $3 or $4 billion. Our deficit was about $1 billion, 1.2 or thereabouts. After 2004, almost an outreach was done to engage more with China, to attract Chinese goods into the country in a big way. I don't want to politicize this subject at this event particularly, but between 2004 and 14, we saw trade grow very, very rapidly, and the trade deficit went up by over 30 times. Nearly 35 times. Trade deficit expanded in that brief 10-year period. I mean, it's beyond imagination to hear of a 3,000% increase in trade deficit in 10 years. We may not find a comparable example at a good high-level base anywhere in the world. Now, it's something for the powers that be at that time to really be held accountable for. But of course, the nation has held them accountable on more than one occasion already, and will probably continue to do that. But we actually decimated Indian manufacturing capabilities. We never allowed Indian manufacturing to flourish. We allowed Indian manufacturing to die in many areas. I remember at that point of time, industry used to plead with government that, look, under-invoiced goods, crappy, low-quality, substandard, suboptimal goods are being allowed to come in. Please put a stop to that. But unfortunately, it was not done. And in the process, we lost out on our own domestic capacity to withstand such inflow of goods. It has taken us some time to create that ecosystem, but we feel today, with the kind of investments that are coming into manufacturing, the tide will turn. More and more domestic manufacturing will take over high quality products, goods and services at affordable prices. Simultaneously, we are working very extensively on bringing quality consciousness into the country. So you'll be happy to know our quality control orders, so that we don't get substandard and low quality goods into the country, have been increased by nearly 4x. We were about 100, we are now 440 products which are under quality control orders. And in the next probably 2 years, this will go up to 2,000 products.
Wow.
So the effort across the government of India is that we focus on quality. Prime Minister Modi, another program he initiated in 14 itself, and we've been relentlessly working on it, was Z. Zero effect, zero defect. I'm sure sustainability must have been a theme in various sessions at the Raisina Dialogue.
Correct.
But India is one of the few countries which has taken sustainability very seriously, not from today, but since times immemorial. We respected nature even 5,000 years ago. Even today, I think we pray to the Sun Lord, at least I do, every morning. Most Indians respect nature, we believe in regenerating our forests, we believe in planting trees, we believe in venerating our rivers and the seas and oceans. Our fishermen don't go out to fish 1 month in the year.
Yeah.
They are so conscious
Yeah.
that fish needs time to rebreed. What the world is grappling with, fisheries agreements and whatnot, comes intrinsically to an Indian fisherman.
Correct.
So sustainability and quality, these are the two things that are going to hold India in good stead. We are preparing the nation to be a quality conscious country. Gone are the days where Indian products had a mark on every product for export quality. Remember those old days? Some of our senior colleagues here will remember. For export quality. And you went to the store and said, "Zara export quality ka koi maal dikhaiye."
Yeah.
Show me something which is of export quality. That is becoming history in India now. We'll have one quality and that will be the best quality.
So I'll get one final question before we open this up to our lovely audience here. And that is, already the Prime Minister has set the $5 trillion target. We are now the 5th largest economy in the world, displacing Britain. And the estimates are before the end of the decade, we could displace Germany as the 4th largest. As Minister for Commerce and Industry and one of the critical ministers in this government, what is your own assessment? And Prime Minister has talked about this, the decade from 2020 to 2030 is India's make or break decade. At the end of this 10-year period, where will India be?
Well, first of all, let me correct a couple of things that you said.
Okay.
5 trillion truly was a target, is a target. We lost a couple of years in COVID.
True.
We came back in 22 to where we were in 20. But we'll get there soon enough. My own guess estimate is that we'll be there in the next 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
As regards becoming the 3rd largest economy by the end of the decade, again, my own estimates and borne out by other international data points and the growth story in different countries, particularly the two who are still ahead of us, number 3 and number 4. My sense is we'll get there even before the end of the decade, most likely by 27 as per the IMF, or at best 2028. We'll be the 3rd largest economy in the world, very, very clearly. The bigger story is in the foundation that we've laid for the next 25 years, the Amrit Kal, which the Prime Minister has defined as the period where we are going to take this country to greater heights. We are looking to become a developed economy by 2047. We are looking to become a prosperous country with inclusive growth across the country. Everybody, every citizen of India, every resident in India, having a good quality of life, having good opportunities in his life. And I say this with great confidence that in a business as usual case, extrapolating what we've done in the last 25, 30 years. 30 years ago we were under $300 billion.
Correct.
30 years ago, 280 or so.
Yeah.
Today, last year we were 3.5 trillion. That's about 11x, 11.5x.
Yeah.
My own sense is business as usual. By 2047, we'll be a $32 trillion economy. But given the decisive and inspirational leadership of Prime Minister Modi, given the fact that the nation today has come together as one with a sense of duty to achieve extraordinary results, my own sense is will be, if not for more than 40, at least a $40 trillion by 2047.
Wow, $40 trillion economy by 2047. That is more than what America is right now. So that's what the minister is predicting. I don't know if you or I will be around till 2047,
know, but a lot of young kids
a lot
here
of
will be.
young people here will be. So let's open this up on that note to our audience here. I believe there are microphones in the audience. All right, one question. Okay, let's get one question in. All right, the gentleman here. Somebody should carry a microphone to him, please.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dheeraj Yadav. My question is, after so many reforms and improvements in the ease of doing business, why has India still not been able to achieve double-digit growth? Sir, 7-8% growth was there during Congress rule also, but it was riddled with lot of corruption and indecisiveness. And sir, without double-digit growth, I don't think we will be able to close the gap with China. And
Well,
sir,
sorry.
second question, sir, cities are the engines of growth and they also generate the majority of the GST of their respective states. in southern India, most of the states have one big city, but in North India, apart from Delhi NCR, there is no other big city. So why don't government build one big city each in Rajasthan, UP, and Haryana to boost growth? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, young man. Incidentally, 7-8% growth which you are talking about in the Congress government happened at the back of indiscriminate bank lending, where we pump priced the economy only for a couple of years or so, which actually became the bane of India. 2 years from there, we became a fragile 5 economy. So growth has to be calibrated based on the capacity of the economy to be able to absorb that growth. It has to be on the back of, it's like good growth and sometimes growth which is temporary but causes pain in the long run. So I think what we have been focused on is sustainable growth. We have been focused on creating the building blocks for growth in the long run and based on the capacity along with what the international scenarios are able to absorb. And a case in point is 2013-14. We artificially strengthened our rupee by taking FCNRB bonds at phenomenally higher interest costs, and landed up in such a soup in terms of the entire international equation that the economy was on the verge of brink of collapse in 2014 when we came into government. I remember there was a lot of talk that we should come out with a white paper. Correct. And let the world know and let the countrymen know how bad the situation was and what we had inherited. But Prime Minister Modi took the right path in saying that, you don't disclose your cards and show yourself to be a weak nation. You have a problem, we'll resolve the problem. We'll struggle, but we'll resolve the problem. So I think that has held us in good stead and we are on the right path. But for COVID of 2 years, we would have been in a much brighter spot today. I really like your point about the cities. Creating new cities is about having land of that nature, and it's a very long drawn affair. Having said that, it's not a bad idea. We should look at having some new cities, but it'll have to be a collective effort in many ways with the local population and the central state government. We saw that Amravati, which was sought to be created as a new city, didn't come up successfully. Land laws, land acquisition laws are quite different today than from the past. I think Prime Minister Modi's idea of creating smart cities from within the existing cities, improving the infrastructure and taking them forward through greater growth on the peripheries of the cities, through better connectivity, better infrastructure. So today, Delhi is no more Delhi, it's expanding not only to Gurgaon and Noida and Faridabad, but on the other side it's gone even beyond Meerut, Greater Noida and beyond. Jewar Airport will come up, a whole new center will get connected to Delhi with 30-minute travel time. We are now having this metro network expanding rapidly in about 25 cities already across the country. So infrastructure is our calling card, and with that calling card, I think lives in the cities will improve significantly.
All right, I think we can take one last question from the lady there. Yeah. The lady there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Namaskar, Piyush ji. A very, very great session, let me tell you. I would like to know your thoughts on the status of the ongoing FTA negotiations with Canada and the Gulf countries for that matter. And on the lighter note, if you could just tell me what are the priority sectors for the exports, because you just spoke about this 750 billion. So, thank you.
Well, FTA negotiations are very complex negotiations because you have to crystal gaze into the future. You have to look at what will happen 10 years, 30 years, and even 50 years beyond. But I can only tell you that negotiations are going on very well with the United Kingdom, with Canada. EU, we've already had 3 rounds. The 4th round starts on the 13th, next weekend or so. Sorry, Monday, week after. And I can only tell you that we are on the right path. We have to find the right balance. It has to be equitable. It has to be a win-win for both. They have to get some, we have to get some. And that negotiation takes place in a very good atmosphere, particularly with these geographies. The GCC countries are also keen to get into active negotiations. Switzerland and the EFTA countries are keen to launch negotiations. They've had, I think, 5 or 6 meetings with me already. The EA-EU countries in Eastern Europe are very keen to process or proceed with negotiations faster. I had a minister from the Mercosur countries talking about speeding up with Mercosur, and if that doesn't happen, exploring what we can do bilaterally. I'm just sharing this with everybody just to make you understand. That's where today the world looks at India. There's no region in the world that does not want to expand economic relations, trade and business with India. And as far as sectors go, I think manufacturing and particularly labor-oriented manufacturing was a traditional sector which will continue to be important. Agriculture, we did $50 billion last year. We'll do better this year and will continue to support the rest of the world in the years to come. But now, India is getting more and more into manufactured goods, high quality goods, modern goods. Services is growing at a frenzied pace, and this is without tourism having come back fully. Tourism, travel, transport, aviation, all of these are still not yet fully out of the woods. They're still at just about pre-COVID levels, 3 years after COVID. We'll hopefully see growth now with so many aircraft being already ordered and many more in the annual. My own sense is 2,000 aircrafts India will need in this decade, 2,000, the next 10 years. That's going to be the growth in aviation. And aviation alone can provide 20 million people work opportunity, jobs, business, small ways to engage with the sector. You know, just airports, we've doubled the airports. There'll be another 75 airports in the next few years. So we'll have 225 airports in India. They not only provide jobs within the aviation industry, taxis, hotels, even the dhabas around it.
Food,
It's and the infrastructure to get there. It's a whole ecosystem. So we are going to expand in services. We're going to expand in modern manufactured goods. And my own sense is by 2030, I had set a target that we should be $1 trillion of export of goods and $1 trillion of services. Now I can see that probably in services we may get there faster. Thank you.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for Mr. Piyush Goyal, Minister for Commerce and Industry.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for joining us today. And of course, Saka, thank you for the fantastic moderation.